各位新浪网友，大家好！清洁能源技术已经日益成为今天
Clean energy technology has become mainstream now. The possibility of turning such technologies into new profitable models is widely discussed by industry professionals. SINA Finance had an opportunity to discuss this and other topics with Mr. Andrew Barron Worden, chairman of Barron Partners, an international private investment fund based in New York, with a focus on investing in profitable clean tech companies. Since its foundation in 2002, Barron Partners has invested over 3 billion RMB in companies across several industries, almost half of these investments in China. Since 2004, Barron has invested 1.3 billion RMB in Chinese companies and has also helped Chinese companies go public. We wondered what kind of investment opportunities we can expect to see in clean tech. SINA Finance had an exclusive dialogue with Mr. Worden. The following is a transcript of the interview. You've made half of your investments in China. We are eager to know why you are so bullish on the future of China's clean energy.
We feel that the Chinese government is very progressive in the new energy area, both in helping China to build its own new energy market, both in wind and nuclear short term, and also solar eventually, and also helping companies in China to grow their businesses to serve the export markets, mostly in wind and solar right now.
Countries around the world are in the beginning stages of the clean tech industry. Lots of professionals are discussing this. Does China have second mover advantages in that they can learn from those countries who went into the space before them? What's your opinion?
The United States was deploying wind 30 years ago. Europe, Vestas, Gamesa, and GE were all dominant players for a long time. China was very late starting in the wind power game. Even just the last few years, really, Goldwind, Minyang, Sinovel. So absolutely, that's true. China is very late in the game compared to other competitors. However, in the nuclear business, it's even more extreme. In France, 75% of their electricity comes from nuclear, 20% in the United States. So the difference, however, is that frankly, the Chinese government is so progressive in helping Chinese companies to push very rapidly in this area, in the new energy area in general, wind, solar, and nuclear. That's a huge, huge part of it. The Chinese also have significant advantages, I think, which they are able to leverage, which are basically manufacturing innovation and also economies of scale in manufacturing, which give China a huge edge and have already caused China to take 90% of the PV market, polysilicon and monosilicon, in the solar business. In wind as well, they have already displaced the Europeans and Americans. About 90% of the windmills going into China are Chinese-made. The SOEs are most likely going to be building the nuclear power plants here, and China is planning to spend a couple trillion US dollars in the next 20 years building a couple hundred nuclear power plants, which is just a massive scale build. Their technology of choice is most likely going to be Westinghouse AP1000 reactor Generation 3 Plus, which is 1.1 GW. This is an awesome reactor, which is 100 times safer than current generation reactors, according to Westinghouse. The strategy we see the Chinese companies employing is to manufacture almost all the metal here, and we think essentially pay Westinghouse a royalty and or enter into a joint venture agreement for the technology. Although knowing Chinese innovation, what China has done, for example, with high-speed rail, I imagine at one point, Chinese technology will be in this field as well. Basically, the nuclear reactor business is so complicated, however, I imagine that for quite a while there will be a good cooperation between Westinghouse and Chinese manufacturers of nuclear power plants. Actually, just to be totally fair to the French, there's a French player in the game as well. The Chinese announced a relationship with the French to utilize their nuclear reactor technology as well.
You just shared your thoughts with us on wind, solar, and nuclear development in China. We would like to know, as a professional investor, in which industries will Barron invest in China in the future?
Currently, our heaviest focus is on wind and solar. We also have one investment in the nuclear space, which is actually an American company, which we own almost half of, and they have been in the nuclear business for 30 or 40 years. They are one of 4 machine and fabrication companies in the nuclear sector that has N-stamp approval, N stamps for nuclear, and they are authorized to be independent metal fabricators and machinists. They make the big parts that go inside the nuclear reactors for Westinghouse and GE, for example. They have been customers of theirs for a long time. They actually have made some of the parts when the Westinghouse AP1000 came to China. Coincidentally, the CEO of that company is actually in China now, looking around to partner with and help companies that make the large metal parts that will be feeding up to the SOEs that are building the reactors. So this is a long-term project, obviously, and really big scale. But I believe that Chinese companies are very interested in partnering with U.S. companies that have the technological and manufacturing experience with a long history of making advanced nuclear reactors, and especially for the Westinghouse AP1000 series.
We know that since 2004, Barron has invested over 1.3 billion RMB in China. We are also wondering, since you don't have an RMB fund, if you have any plans to set one up in the future.
Very good question. Actually, Sunday, I sat down with legal counsel at one of the top Chinese law firms to discuss this. I think we are underway in that department. In the past year, 2 years, we have definitely run into a lot of Chinese companies that want to go public in China, not outside China. So I think that's definitely a direction we have to go and are going in. Absolutely, yes.
Regarding the relationship between investment funds and the companies in which they invest, there is a criticism from some professionals that aside from money, what else beneficial does a fund really provide for these companies? We have noticed that in Barron's investment history, you have helped quite a few companies to become publicly traded. Could you tell us more about other assistance that Barron has offered aside from capital?
That's a very good question. Basically, we also feel not just from the perspective of helping the company, but also from the perspective of if we are going to invest in a company and risk our reputation, we have to make sure that the company develops in a way which is most optimum for all the shareholders, and for the market, and for our friends that are going to follow us and buy the shares in the market. And also, if we are going to introduce the company to channel partners, international customers, and if we are going to essentially be recommending the company, endorsing the company to the world, so to speak, we need to make sure that the company is going to live up to that. So we add value in many ways. One is the 8 Secrets of Capital Markets, which we wrote with over 25 years of experience from myself. We put together this book in English and Chinese, which gives the Chinese entrepreneur, often for the first time, a real guidebook to capital markets and how they work so that he can grow his business, maximize the value of public markets, raise money along the way in the best manner so he still ends up owning a lot of the company, so the company doesn't get taken away through financings along the way. So that's the first value add. Another value add is that typically we get involved with the companies that may be somewhat of a good, innovative manufacturer, but their concentration of revenue in clean tech isn't very high. With our capital, they are able to move into higher value-add manufacturing. Take China Wind, for example. They went from a machine shop to a forger, then to an ESR forger, which are very advanced, relatively speaking, metallurgy technologies. Also, their revenues went from 1% to 50% clean tech. Their products are now selling to some of the top Chinese wind turbine companies, typically through companies that they sell products to that then make bearings or other things that go to the turbine makers. They also sell some to the turbine makers directly. And now, through an introduction that we made as well, they are entering the international market in clean tech, which is a really big development for them, which gets them into providing furnaces for one of the biggest solar equipment makers in the world. They are just ramping that up. So hopefully they can execute on that. That's the second value add. The third value add is marketing branding, which is a whole other level of value add and conversation.